Well, the second day of the BRICS Summit is underway in South Africa. The plenary session of the summit concluded just a little while back. All the leaders of member countries made their comments. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for the BRICS group to establish a space exploration consortium. Prime Minister Modi shared India's experience with digital delivery of public goods and offered to share the learnings with BRICS nations. The Indian Prime Minister also recommended joint efforts in education, technology, and skill assessment. Russian President Vladimir Putin called for a multipolar world order. At the same time, he also mentioned range of topics like diversification of supply chain, de-dollarization, and transfer to local currency. Putin also shared few details about next year's BRICS summit, as Russia will host the next summit in October of 2024 in the city of Kazan. Brazilian President Lula da Silva stressed on the need of a common currency used by BRICS countries in commercial transactions. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed the expansion of BRICS. Xi said the group should expand politically and security cooperation to uphold peace and tranquility, while adding that the members should support each other on our core interests and enhance coordination on major international and regional issues. So as we continue with our ongoing coverage of the BRICS Summit, we are now being joined by Zemedina Nagatu from Nairobi, Kenya. He is the global chairman of a U.S.-based investment firm, Fairfax Africa Fund. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope I pronounced your name correctly. So here we are with the BRICS Summit, some divisions regarding expansion or not, but I think what many, at least in the global south, are looking to find out is how a multilateral forum like BRICS can take forward the voices of the global south.
Right. First of all, thank you very much for having me on your program. You mentioned in your intro, the BRICS actually are a formidable grouping, even today, let alone forward-looking. I mean, the simple fact that the spectacular success of India today in space is a reflection that, as you mentioned in the intro, the global south has already risen. I mean, India is now the fifth largest economy in the world. 20, 30 years ago, in the non-aligned movement, India was not as developed as it is. The same with China, the same with Brazil. So the fact of the matter is these are potentially very strong competitors, in my view, to the global order that exists today, which was established after 1945. Yes, it has its own internal challenges, but when you account for something like a third of global GDP, 40% of global population, and this is the important part, we're not looking at 40 plus countries looking to join it. You know, this grouping is going to be very serious, very formidable. And the most important thing is they actually can deliver on the promises that they're making. For example, the BRICS Bank, as it's called. I mean, I think it's supposed to be a competitor or complement to the World Bank. A lot of emerging economies in the global south today do not believe they have a fair share of access in finance, which is the lubricant that is needed. So, for example, investors like us would love to see the BRICS countries get stronger, and especially since they're looking at it on a global scale. And that makes it easier for investors to assess risk, to assess investment opportunities. So overall, despite some of the differences, some of the naysayers around the world, I happen to think it's important to have the BRICS succeed at this time, especially as it's being led by India, by China, by Brazil. Obviously, Russia at the moment has their challenges, but eventually these are going to be contributors, not detractors. I know there is the geopolitical angle to it, and it must, but at the end of the day, the economic transformation in the global south is good for everybody.
Speaking of BRICS expansion, there are some that are in favor, some that oppose. How imperative and necessary do you think expansion would be at this point, considering the fact that some of the countries that want to join BRICS, they're not exactly democracies.
Very interesting word you use there, democracies. Let me put it this way. In China, with a one-party state, has managed to uplift over 800 million people out of abject poverty in less than 30 years. India, 20 some years ago, was not even in the top 10. India is a democracy, I do agree, but that should not be the defining characteristics of who joins, who stays, how we develop. Each country has its own model. I think the notion that we can import wholesale cut and paste from the West to emerging countries like Africa, the development path that the West took, I think is not appropriate in this day and age. We're in 2023. So I'm not sure the key measurement criteria should be the word democracy. By the way, democracy, I live in the US, we operate out of the United States. What is democracy? Each country has to define its own set of democracy. But I think that the focus should be, can we deliver on the promises for the billions of people in developing countries? And I think the BRICS can contribute to that. By the way, and I want to emphasize, it's not an either or proposition. It's not like there's a lot of commentary going around the world saying, well, if you apply to join the BRICS, you mean you're anti-Western. It's not. It's to complement, to gain access. But look at what's driving some of the initiatives in the BRICS countries. A lot of them say, we're not at the table. We're not at the table when the G7 or the developed West is making decisions. They're saying that's unfair. The World Bank, the IMF, all those in the UN were established right after 1945, after the end of the Second World War. A lot of these countries were actually still under colonialism. They didn't even really have their own independence. But today that has completely changed. So they're saying we need to be either put us at the table when you're making global decisions, or we go set up our own forum, but not to as a clash, but more to complement and help shape global thinking, global development. And so I would look at it that way, as a development angle. For example, India can teach a lot. I mean, your success today in space can be shared with others in the future BRICS grouping. And the other thing, by the way, we should remember, who is applying to join? Why are all these countries like Saudi Arabia, Argentina, in Africa it's going to be Egypt and Ethiopia. Why are these countries? Because they are the future. If you look at the forecast from Goldman Sachs, for example, by in the next 40, 50 years, there'll be 3 countries in the top 15 in terms of the size of the economy, 3 countries from Africa. Is it fair to leave them out the way the world order is today? No. I'm originally from Ethiopia. Ethiopia is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And it'll be one of the top 10 largest populations in the world in the next 25, 30 years. So this is how I should look at it, not the word we're using.
That's absolutely right. Very, very fair point. Thank you for your perspective, and thank you for joining us on WION today.